We might as well take it chronologically and start with Agatha Christie, because first of all, she ties in very nicely. Did you know she married an archaeologist? There you go. So I thought that would see. Now we're tied into the morning's class on archaeology, and last week's was on something like that. She wrote her first book in 1920. It was called An Affair at Styles, and a Belgian gentleman with the little gray cells is Hercule Poirot is introduced. But the story I gave you, obviously, is not that one. I don't know if I should even bother. Do you want to know anything about Agatha? Because, I mean, you know, all right, just very quickly. She was born in 1890 in Torquay, actually, they pronounce it, England. Never went to school a day in her life. All governesses and tutors. She's at the end of the Victorian period. Her father was American, and her mother English. Her father dies when she's 11. Torquay, Cornwall. It's Cornwall, England. It's a resort town. I actually was there, and I went to her house, and I saw their little museum upstairs, and all that. What else do I want to say? Oh, so she marries this guy, Archie Christie, in 1914, just before World War I breaks out. He is both an aviator, and when he comes back from the war, he's a stockbroker. What can I tell you? In 1926, three things happened. That's the year she disappeared. Okay. She published The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and by then they had already formed some kind of a detective writers guild kind of thing. And do you all know the Murder of Roger Ackroyd? It's one of these mind-boggling things. It's written in the first person, and you'll forgive me if I'm a spoiler here. Turns out that the narrator is the murderer. And people were outraged. There was so much controversy. This isn't playing fair. You know, you're supposed to be able to count on the narrator to tell you the truth, blah, 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 blah. And she got awful publicity about it. Well, she got a lot of publicity. It sold like hotcakes. Her mother died. And she found out her husband was having an affair. And she disappears for 10 days, and her car is found outside of the hotel where her husband is spending the weekend with this woman. And she is found, like 10 days later, checked into another hotel using the other woman's name. So there was a whole question, was it amnesia? The doctor said it was. It was amnesia, it was a nervous breakdown, it was whatever it was. Probably. But she comes back from that, there's so much publicity about it, and such awful publicity about it, that she comes back and she no interviews. She basically lives well, not exactly a reclusive life, because she does a lot of traveling, but she won't talk to the press. She doesn't want to have anything to do with the public. They get divorced, and a couple of years later, she marries this guy, Max Mallowan, an archaeologist, 14 years younger than her. Yay! I thought that was really neat that she did that. Anyhow. So, the first, she wrote she's probably one of the most prolific mystery writers around. She wrote a book a year, wrote and published a book a year for more than 50 years. That is just, you know, really incredible. She did go with her archaeologist husband. She went to the Nile, she went to Mesopotamia. This is why you have Death on the Nile, and She does not at all go into any of the people around her. There's no interaction. It's all this little group. She's also the mistress of the classic, you know, the weekend in the country mystery. The 20s and the 30s were considered the golden age of the detective story. Because this is the typical, you have a group of people away for the weekend in the country, and one of them is murdered. I mean, she outdid herself with 10 Little Indians. Remember that one? And then there were none, where she has them all on an island, and she kills them off one by one. She also had a fabulous, do you know did you ever read her ABC Murders? It's a series of 3 people are killed, and they think they have a psychotic serial killer on their hand, kind of thing, and who's working his way down the alphabet. And this is a Poirot one, and Poirot solves it, and I don't remember how, except that the basic theory is you only kill more than one person. He obviously did not know Ted Bundy, or but you only kill more than one person if you're trying to disguise something. And he discovers that only one of the 3 people was the intended victim. That was the one that there was a motive for. And the others were kind of killed to just camouflage. She's really amazing. Somebody said of her, there's been a lot of talk, was she a feminist writer, was she an anti-feminist writer? Because most of her female characters are downright either unpleasant or kind of dithery, like Miss Marple. But she's got some really fabulous, strong ones that she wrote, but they're few and far between. So, Miss Marple, she wrote 13 Miss Marple novels and 22 short stories about her. And she first appears in 1928 in a series of short stories. So we have to talk about Miss Marple now. I'm finished with Agatha. I'm going to talk about Miss Marple. So, forget Margaret Rutherford, who I'm sorry, I know she was a fun actress and all of this. You all know the ones in the movies, and I just never, she was not Miss Marple to me. Just the whole wrong, so. How would you characterize Miss Marple? Do you have a description of her? Do you have any comments about her? What do you think?
I think she was extremely nosy, and she knew all the gossip that was going on. And whenever she tried to think about character or motivation, she always looked back at her little town of Margaret Mead and would identify different people in the town and say somehow or other the murderer reminded her of how this person did this or that person did that, but she was a terrible gossip. But it did very well by her.
Anybody else besides her being gossipy? Yeah, Esther.
I thought her appearance probably belied the fact that her brain was going constantly, and putting 1 and 1 together, 2 and 1 together, 3 and 1 together, until she came to conclusions that may not have been useful at the moment, but on which she could draw at some time.
There's a fabulous, her buddy is a man named Sir Henry Clithering. She does not get along with the police, by and large. There's this guy, Slack, who happens to be in this. But Sir Henry Clithering says she is just the finest detective God ever made. Natural genius, cultivated in a suitable soil. He told me never to despise the elderly ladies. He said that they could usually tell you what might have happened, what ought to have happened, and what did happen. And they can tell you why it happened. He added that this particular elderly lady was at the top of the class. So that's now, physically, yes?
I saw her as a very bright student of human nature. As Teddy said, she used it in psychology. She understood that. But rather than being a gossip, I thought she was a gossip receiver. And she would take that, as Esther said, and just divide it up. But I don't think she passed a lot along. I think she just kind of peeked around and listened and
I
got it.
stand corrected.
You can still correct it too. Yeah.
I thought she also delighted in setting up a subtle trap all along, and she knew she was doing it for the detectives. I think she did well in showing them up at the end. However, she shows a little restraint.
She's marvelous. That one line where the detective comes to see her and says, yes, you hear about the murder. How did you hear about it? She simply says, fish. And then you get, oh, thank you, the fish boy to live at the, yeah. And yes, in that sense, Susan's right. She just received the gossip. She did not pass it along. And you do like, I mean, Mr. Spenlow, there's something very sweet about this little man trying to be stiff upper lip. Here his wife is murdered, and he's busy puttering around trying to figure out what he should plant in his garden. And he's suspect immediately because he does not display the proper shock or sorrow or emotion. So everybody thinks right away, oh, it must be he.